thanks everyone for joining us for our backup and recovery office hours for November. Marco and I will be covering some cloud-related products today. My name is Kelly Smith. As I mentioned, Marco Calmasini will also be presenting some information about cloud. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to dive right in, and these are the two subjects we're going to be covering today. I'm going to cover an announcement that we made at Cloud World around Zero Data Loss Autonomous Recovery Service, which is essentially the Zero Data Loss Recovery Appliance in OCI. So you'll be able to access all the functionality that's available on premises today with the Recovery Appliance in a service in OCI. And I'll talk about how that works. And we'll even do a demo so you can see it running live. Just so everyone's aware, the service has not reached GA yet. We're doing the final work to make that happen, but you will see that live in OCI in the very near future. So keep your eye out for that, and I'll show you how it'll be surfaced in the customer tenancies. Marco is then going to talk about Oracle Secure Backup and OCI Marketplace, and then we'll do some Q&A. At the end, we'll have dedicated time for Q&A, but ask questions along the way. We'll stop and answer. Okay, so let's talk about the Zero Data Loss Autonomous Recovery Service. And what I want to talk about first are customer challenges with database backups in the cloud. The first is around ransomware. There are three vectors we want to talk about with ransomware and the challenges that customers face. First, backup takes all your data and packages it in a nice little portable component. So, and what we don't want to have happen is we don't want the backup to become a vehicle to theft. So if you think about how you're doing backups on premises today and in the cloud, you have to be careful to make sure that all the data that ends up in the package, in the backup package is encrypted and can't just be leveraged and picked up by someone and leveraged for data theft. And that can happen during or after an attack. We want to make sure that those backups stay safe because it is a convenient package for data transport. Next, obviously, when there's a malicious attack and systems are compromised, we want to minimize the amount of data loss exposure. Traditional products, when they're protecting the Oracle database, protect on a schedule, which means you have to think to yourself, okay, a malicious attack just occurred. When is the last point in time that I can recover to? Because my backup runs hourly, daily, even down to 15 minutes, right? There are some customers that are very aggressive with their Oracle database backups. They protect the data every 15 minutes. But that still means that there could be up to 15 minutes of data loss after a malicious attack. And can you really afford 15 minutes? I mean, it doesn't sound like much, but if you have a highly transactional database that's producing lots and lots of data, 15 minutes could represent a lot of transactions. And then finally, protection against backup deletion or alteration. So, if someone is a sysdba and they go to RMAN, there's a very convenient, a convenient way, a convenient command to clean up the database and all backups, which works great in test dev. But if you're in production and someone uses that command maliciously, that means your production database is gone and your backups are gone. So you have to be very careful with that. And the folks who are out there doing malicious activity know this stuff. They know that they can go in, destroy your database and your backups at the same time. So we have to have some safeguards in place to protect against that kind of deletion or alteration. Next, the operational cost impact. Everything in the cloud, runs on pay per usage, and weekly full backups are time and resource intensive. And those time and resources cost money. So trying to make sure that those weekly full backups don't become overwhelming to the system, and that they don't run into your production time, right? That's a concern with backups and has been for years. The recovery appliance on premises has alleviated some of that problem. But in the cloud, a weekly full backup is still a real thing today. Backup validations also, they consume production resources. And I have conversations with customers all the time. Just had one last week where the customer said they just don't do validations. They don't have time. They don't have the resources. It's too impactful for production. And that just means that they're doing backups that they don't really know if they're good. They're not doing any validation process on those backups. So that's problematic. It needs to be part of your operational workflows, but it does consume production database resources. And then finally, cloud costs are difficult to interpret. It's really easy to deploy stuff, right? A few clicks, database is up and running. You can do all kinds of stuff really quickly. But it's difficult to interpret that from an overall consumption perspective. And some companies require that all the dollars spent in the cloud have to be assigned to departments, so that they know where every dollar being spent in the cloud is being spent, and who is consuming that from a departmental perspective. And that's difficult to interpret when you don't understand what your overall operational costs look like and the granularity behind that. And then finally, complex management. It's time consuming to configure and manage cloud scale protection. You have lots of databases. Are they all being protected properly? Were they all set up right? That can be very difficult and daunting to manage. And even after you get everything running, it's very difficult to determine the backup health and your recoverability. You want to know that the backups that are being created is not just a job that completed successfully. It's actually that the backups are healthy and they can be used to recover in the time window that you've specified. And then finally, it's difficult to determine the actual space that's being utilized for database backup. So backups are going on. What is the total space consumption? Like, I'm backing up this database. How much space is it using? I've set a retention. Does the retention and the space utilization match my business goals for that database, or is it costing me more than it should? And you want to make some of those business decisions, and that's difficult to make if you can't see all this information very easily. Okay, so now let's look at the Zero Data Loss Autonomous Recovery Service using these same themes. So first, on the ransomware, we have ransomware resiliency. So instead of those backups being very easy to move around and just use that convenient package that's very portable, we have mandatory encryption. So no data can go into a backup that is not encrypted. It's automated, it's built into the system, and we absolutely require it. If a DBA made a mistake and ran an RMAN command to the recovery service and they forgot to set encryption, we will block the data from coming into the infrastructure. We're very serious about making sure that the data that is being sent to the recovery service is encrypted throughout its life cycle, and that you are protected from any malicious activity that could turn that backup into a portable data theft device. Next, we safeguard the databases, the database backups, by enforcing a 14-day minimum retention. So that means any of the backups that were created in the last 14 days cannot be deleted, not by an administrator, not by the DBA. You can set your policies higher. I'll show you how that works, but it's a minimum of 14 days. We safeguard those database backups for a minimum of 14 days. And then finally, we're optimizing the backups in the background. Everyone who's used the recovery appliance on premises, they realize how this optimization works. What we're doing is we're taking incremental backups and turning them into full so that you have very fast recovery, and we have the capability of doing zero data loss. So now when there's a malicious attack, you know that the data is encrypted. The data can't be deleted, at least for the last 14 days at a minimum. And you can recover very quickly to the very last transaction that occurred before the malicious attack. So we want to make sure that all those things are easily accessible for you. Going to operational efficiency, as I mentioned, we're doing incrementals now, so no more weekly full backups. That eliminates a lot of production database overhead, especially when you think about the fact that a typical database changes by around 5%. And that means that 95% of your data has already been protected before, and it's just a waste of time. So we're only going after that change that has occurred since the last backup. And shorter backup windows are a great thing, right? You don't have to worry now about, are my full backups going to run into my production hours? Because we're using that incremental forever strategy, it keeps the backup window very, very short. So you don't have to worry about that production time. And then finally, recovery validation is done for every single backup, and that is offloaded from the production database. So there is zero impact on the production database to do that work. The recovery service does that all on its own. And that means that every single backup is validated every single time. From an operational simplicity point of view, cloud makes things very easy. It's very quick to configure database protection at scale with zero data loss. I'll show you how this works in the demo. It's literally a few clicks in the UI, and I'll show you this live. Cost controls are very easy to understand. We have database-specific backup consumption metrics, and we even give you the capability we even show you forecast information, so it gives you the understanding of what it's going to cost from a consumption perspective for backups as soon as the database is onboarded. And I'll show you how that's surfaced in the UI. And then finally, everything's rolled up to a convenient dashboard. So in one view, you can see all the databases in a compartment and their backup health, how much consumption they have for backup space. You can see their data loss window, whether they have real-time protection turned on or not, database size, and the policies being used. So you know that there's some consistency around database protection, and I'll show you how that works, because we really want to give you insight into what's happening in your environment. And I'll show you how all that works and how that's surfaced in the demo. So before we switch to the demo, let's look at the architecture really quick. So what we essentially have is we have a cloud infrastructure that's designed for scale, high availability, and load balancing. And what we're essentially doing is we have a fleet of recovery appliances running behind the scenes. So the recovery appliance that has been available on premises for years, we have deployed a fleet of those in every region. And the OCI databases, or Autonomous Database Dedicated, Exadata Database Service, and the Base Database Service send backups in an incremental forever paradigm to the recovery service. The recovery service is using an automated framework to make all this connection happen. So you don't have to worry about scheduling backup jobs and doing all the configuration that's necessary to get a database to talk to backup destination. That's all automated now. Again, I'll show you that in the demo. The data is compressed. So even though the data is encrypted, we are compressing the data. And of course, it is always encrypted. And that's all done through automation. So you don't have to worry about any of those pieces being missed. The encryption keys are owned by the DBA and never stored with the backup. We don't want to have the keys for the backup package sitting right next to each other. The encryption keys are owned by the database. And if you're using Oracle managed keys, then the database keys are managed automatically. And there's a connection between the database service and the recovery service that manages those keys through their life cycle. End-to-end encryption and validation, make sure that the data is secure and recoverable. And really what makes all this work are the control planes that are working behind the scenes for operational orchestration. So you've got your database service, you've got the recovery service, and they're working together to make sure that all the right operational things and the workflows give you the capability of recovering the database. There's no manual intervention you have. Once you configure the backups, everything's taken care of behind the scenes. Registering the database with the recovery appliance, managing the schedules of the backup, the configuration of real-time protection, all that is taken care of. And we're managing the lifecycle from end to end via the control plane. And then that control plane populates the UI with all the information that's important to you. The policy-based retention, the backup health, the storage utilization, that all comes to the surface in the management UI and OCI. So you have all that information. And we put it both in the database UI and in a backup, the recovery service UI. So you see it in both places. And I'll show you how those two work and how the two are tightly connected together. So let's go to, I'm going to switch now to the OCI console. Okay, so we've got our database systems. I'm going to pick on, I'm using the base database service here. I'm going to pick on the sales database that I've configured. Here's my database down at the bottom. And if we go look at configure automatic backups, you'll notice now that the backup destination has a drop down. So you can choose object storage, which has been the default for automatic backups for a very long time, or you can pick the autonomous recovery service. So when you're configuring your automatic backups, you select the autonomous recovery service. You can pick your backup time, you pick your destination, and then you pick your policy. So we have 4 policies that are delivered by default. So you have something to choose right out of the right when you start using the service, but you can also create your own custom policy. So I've created one here called test, and notice that you set whatever number of days you want. You can set between 14 and 95 days, anywhere in between. It's up to you. You just select your policy at that point. And like I say, you can use this policy over and over and over again, and it gets it shows up in the UI, so you know which policy is being leveraged for your databases. So we've got silver. This is the capability to turn on real-time data protection. So simply check that mark, check this box, and real-time data protection will be turned on for the database. And then we ask you some questions about what you want to do when the database is terminated. Databases have their life cycle in OCI. So when the database has reached the end of its life cycle, needs to be deprecated, what do you want to do with the backups? So we give you 2 options. One, just have the backups follow their protection policy for the retention period that you've defined in the policy. So in this case, when the database is terminated, for the next 35 days, backups will just slowly expire out of the system. Or retain the backups for the next 3 days and then delete them. Notice that there's no immediate deletion. We want to make sure that if someone makes a mistake when terminating the database, that the backups stay around for and you can use those for recovery. So once this is done, you save the changes, and you will see information populated in the console for the database. So this is the database. This is the sales database. Notice that we've got automatic backups enabled. We have a health status, so you can see that this database is protected. We don't have real-time enabled, so the data loss exposure is about 18 minutes for this database. If there was a backup failure, it'll be listed right here for any backup failure that occurred in the retention window, and in our case is 35 days. And if there was a next backup schedule, it would be here. I've got anytime running, so there's no backup schedule. It just runs, whenever the cloud automation wants it to. But if I set a time, it will show up in there. Notice that the space used for the recovery window, this is what you're going to be billed for, is prominent in the UI. You know exactly what you're going to be billed for. This is the link to the autonomous recovery service. So now we've got backup and the database tightly linked together, and you can go see more information by clicking on this link. So we're going to follow this link. So we'll click here. Move this. The health of the database, again, is shown prominently on the dashboard. There's the data loss exposure again. This is your full recovery window. So this database has only been backed up for about 8 days. After Cloud World, I rebuilt this infrastructure, and this backup's only been alive for about 8 days. So it's going to be protected for 35, but currently there are 8 days worth of, a little over almost 9 days worth of recovery window. Our current utilization again, and there's our projection, right? So you know that for a recovery window of 35 days, this is the amount of data that is being projected for use. So again, you can make that business decision. Is this database space consumption for backup appropriate for this database, or do I need to turn the retention down some? Like that's a little too much. And this, of course, is the database size. This is the link back to the database. So again, the two are tightly connected together. I can go back to the database console from here, just like I could come to the backup details from here, from there. You'll notice that there's a breadcrumb trail, right? And this, we were looking at protected database details for the sales database. But notice this is plural, protected databases. So if I click up and go up the chain, now I see all the databases in my compartment. There's the sales database that we were just looking at. There's also a finance database. There's an HR database. If real-time protection was enabled, it would show up prominently here. The health status for all the database shows up here. There's my data loss exposure for all these databases, my recovery window. And notice that this database on the bottom has a different policy. So if I was, trying to have a consistent policy in my environment, I would notice that the protection policy is different for this database. There's my space used for the database. So all this data is rolled up and prominent in the dashboard here. The other thing, all of these metrics are put into Metrics Explorer in OCI. So you could create custom reports on this. You can set alarms on this data. So if I wanted to set an alarm for data loss exposure, I can go into my alarms and set an alarm. So I can create an alarm definition. I can create an alarm based on the namespace for the recovery service. And I could say if my data loss exposure is over, go down here and set my dimension. Nope, down here. If my data loss exposure is over, let's say, 60 minutes, then it will set off an alarm and you can configure the alarm, how the alarm is going to behave. And this is for the entire compartment. You can also set them for individual databases. So I would set this alarm would be set for the entire compartment for all the databases in there. This is the interval at which it'll be retrieving data, and it's looking for a value greater than 60. And as we saw, our protection was about 18 minutes. So we're integrating all of that into OCI to make sure that you know what's happening with your database protection. Now, if it's time to recover the database, simply go in here. That little red bar that's popping up is letting me know that I've overridden the defaults in OCI that lets this console appear. From a restore perspective, click restore. You got the option to restore to latest. So that means if I had real-time protection turned on, it would restore up to the last transaction automatically. If I want to restore to a specific date and time, I can simply set that here, set my date and time information, and it'll restore the database up to that date and time, or I can select an SCN. And then once you set this, all of that happens behind the scenes automatically. So you don't have to worry about scripting RMAN. You just select the options that you want in the UI, and the automation does all the work for you. The database backups, of course, appear in the console down here at the bottom. So I'm in the database console. You see all the individual backups. And as always, you could create a database from a backup. And when you create a database or do a restore of a database, it simply becomes a work request. A work request item here would appear for restoring the database, and it would tell you the steps that are being taken to recover that database. And then when it's complete, the work request would be complete. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the presentation and continue onward. Okay, so to sum it up here, ransomware resiliency, automated and mandatory encryption. Notice that I didn't set anything for encryption in the UI. It just happens. When I selected to do a backup, it's automated behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about any of that. That's all managed inside the control planes that are creating the workflow behind the scenes. There's no possibility to delete data that's less than 14 days old. And in the background, I'm not having to do any work to optimize backups. That's all being done by the recovery service. It's fast. It's taking the data that's being sent to the recovery service in an incremental fashion, creating virtual fulls that are ready for fast recovery with zero data loss if you select the real-time protection of the database. There's no more weekly fulls. And again, you don't have to worry about that from a scheduling perspective. The automation is going to take care of that for you. It's going to create the backup jobs that are appropriate for protecting the data in a way that is appropriate for the recovery service, and it gives you the best performance and the best recoverability for the database. You're not having to go in and create and manipulate RMAN scripts to make that happen. The automation does it all for you. And again, incremental forever. Database validation is happening automatically. The recovery validation is happening automatically behind the scenes. So you've got database recovery validation running with every single backup. And if there's any problem, that health status will change. And it'll let you know that was there a problem with the backup? Was there a problem with the validation? All that bubbles up very quickly. And again, you can have alarms set on that so you know exactly what's happening. And as you saw, a few clicks in the UI and you're done. There's also a CLI. So, if you have scripting that provisions database infrastructure in OCI, all the appropriate settings for backup is in that CLI scripting framework. So you can set up the recovery service in that. There's also a Terraform capabilities. So if you're using Terraform to provision infrastructures in OCI, there are settings for the recovery service in that. So you have 3 ways to configure your databases and the backups that go with them. That you do it through the UI, you can do it through a CLI, or you can do it through Terraform. You saw the consumption metrics that get bubbled up, both current and projected, and the dashboard that shows you all the information that's important for you for the database. So we're trying to make backup easy, but give you all the information that ensures you that the backups are being performed and that they are recoverable. So that's it for the recovery service. I've got some additional resources here. There's obviously the website. I wrote a blog that introduces the service. It goes over a lot of the same material, so you can read it and see the screenshots again. And then I've done some live product demos for backup, for monitoring, and for restore. Those are available out on the YouTube, under the Oracle channel. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Marco and let him talk about Oracle Secure Backup in the cloud.
All right, thank you, Kelly. So what I'm going to talk about now is based on a presentation we had an open, Cloud World, and it's about Oracle Secure Backup and how to protect compute instances in OCI with Oracle Secure Backup. So what is Oracle Secure Backup? For those of you that are not familiar with it, it's a traditional backup software that we have for quite some time. By traditional backup software, I mean, it's from a product architecture perspective, it's based on a admin server where the actual Oracle Secure Backup software is installed, the backup catalog is kept, and the main configuration and orchestration and scheduling, etc., happens. It has agents that must be deployed on clients that protects file system or Oracle databases, etc. Okay, so file system is what we want to focus on now for compute instances, and it has another component, it's media server. Its media servers are the modules, right? I would say that control the backup destinations, right? And it can be disk, can be tape, and it can be cloud storage. And the thing you see circled here in red are the components that are relevant. If you are deploying this solution in OCI, it can also be deployed in hybrid environments. So it can be deployed on premises, control OCI clients, can be deployed in OCI, and also have clients on premises, whatever you like. It has automated staging and vaulting, so you can have on-premises disk storage and on-premises client and backup to disk can automatically move those backups to the cloud based on how you want to configure. If it's being used in OCI, you have to follow a BYOL approach. So you have to bring your own license. It's licensed traditional for now, at least. So what happened? Everything you heard from Kelly is great about protecting Oracle databases in OCI, right? But that's not all, right? Customers that are running applications like EBS, PeoplesOft Hyperion, but even their own custom applications have Oracle databases, but also compute nodes where they have application servers or other data or other custom or other application components that they run on compute instances, or maybe they have file storage services, so file shares where they have other type of data. Some customers are moving to OCI, OCVS, which is basically VMware in OCI, right? And how do they protect those data? So we've been working for a while with our colleagues in the management services team, and what they do, they provide managed services for these type of customers that are running these applications, and they manage this OCI environment for them. And among the services they provide, there's also the data protection service. So they control and manage backup and restore for those customers. And obviously they have the need, or they had the need of using software to control that, and they were using a legacy application, one of the probably most common find out there, and for many years, but there are some limitations with that. Number one was the license cost extremely expensive, and a lot of features are not needed in OCI, so they were kind of paying for things that we're not using. The other thing, or important thing they found, is that this application has a lot of Java-based component. Java have frequent CVE patches, frequent security-related patches that are released and that need to be applied. And so that was extremely costly from an operation perspective to continuously patch all the components, all the clients, etc. So OSP doesn't have any Java component, so that was the other thing that we're looking for. And they also had limitation on the reporting for isolated customers using private network, not shared. So they decided to move to Oracle Secure Backup, and we did a lot of work with them to optimize, if you want, OSB to be used in OCI, and also we collected a lot of useful information to add more roadmap items that are very OCI specific that I will talk about at the end. So they had like 300 tenancies, 300 customers. They are more now. They have now 6,500 clients, 5,000 are Linux, and 1,500 are Windows clients. They do, obviously 6,500 full backups every weekend. They do 39,000 incremental backups per week on weekdays. They have 10 petabytes of data in OCI object storage. And this is good, right? Since OCI is pretty reliable and customers are not doing weird things, losing data, they only do 10 restores per month so far. But this is the environment we are talking about right now. And how did they do that? It's a kind of well automated, okay, I said almost fully automated process that they use and that we developed together using or developing Ansible runbooks for these, and I will show you later how they work. They basically they have an onboarding team that provision the whole environment for the customers that are coming into OCI. So they, among the other servers, they also provision OSB servers. And they configure the networking, they configure the VCN security list, so the ports that OSB needs are open. And then they just pass this inventory list to the backup team. The backup team takes this inventory list and deploy OSB on admin server and media server and the client installation. And this is all done automatically through Ansible. And after that, they can configure and schedule backups and monitor operations. So this is what they do. And they have these rules that I decided to use to have the OSB admin server to also act as a media server for the first 30 clients, and then they add additional media servers every 30 clients on average. And this is based on the previous configuration they used with the previous software. Sometimes they go larger. If the clients are small, they use more than that. And they use one cloud device, so basically one object storage per tenancy. In doing this, there were some lessons learned that I asked them to share and say, what would you tell someone that wants to do that? One thing they said, okay, is have a clear understanding on how the configuration is currently running before migrating, so that when you notice, for example, capacity reports and how much storage you are consuming, and you see changes, you are not surprised, right? Because they found out there were things in the previous world that they were not backing up, they were supposed to back up. And so when they see differences in capacity consumption, they didn't have the old data anymore to go back and understand what was going on. So, but this is more from their side. If you're using eBusiness Suite, make sure that the ports are set correctly. If you left the default on eBusiness Suite, it will take that port 10,000, which is officially assigned to NDMP, which is the protocol the OSB uses. But nevertheless, they decided to leave it for EBS and changed and used the custom port for OSB. If there's a large number of clients, you have to make sure that enough ports are open in the security lists, right? So that you don't run out of available ports when multiple jobs are going on in parallel. And when this is something that can be decided or not, most customers have a single tenancy. So if you have one tenancy, you do not order that. If there are multiple tenancies, they decided to use one domain admin server per tenancy. In theory, you can cross tenancies as long as there's network communication between the tenancies. You can definitely use one domain, OSB domain, servicing multiple tenancies, but they decided not to. The interesting thing is what we decided to start working on. This is not really a roadmap, meaning it's not ordered in time and there are no timelines, but those are the projects that we are working on to make OSB better integrated with OCI. We're working on supporting image level backups of block storage volumes, adding single file restore capabilities. So OCI Compute provides the capabilities of backing up block volumes. Those are image level backups. You can do or schedule a backup of the volume, but there's no knowledge of what you have inside that volume, right? What the file system content is, etc. So now OSB will be able to orchestrate those backups and also maintain a catalog of the file. So you will be able to browse or search for file, identify on which backup those files or that version of the file is contained, initiate a restore that will automatically initiate the restore of the block volume, attach the block volume, extract the file you want to restore the single file. We're working on adding similar capabilities for VMware volumes for customers that are using OCVS. We are adding a feature to move away from the media server concept. So media server would not need to be sized anymore based on the amount of volume they're backing up, etc., because each client can or will be able to back up directly to and access directly object storage without the need of having the data flowing through a media server. We're adding support for retention rules in order to be able to use immutable buckets for ransomware protection, adding the ability to centralize monitoring for multiple OSB domains. So if you have multiple domains, you will be able to control and report on all of them from a single location. And OMCS specifically is adding the ability to give access directly to customers. So customers will be able to do a kind of self-service approach and initiate restores or monitor what's going on, create reports, etc. And this is for obviously OMCS customers. The first thing that will happen, this will happen hopefully soon, is making Oracle Secure Backup available in OCI. This would simplify a lot deployment in OCI. There will be no need to download the OSB binaries, provision the compute instance, copy the binaries on it, install them, etc. Everything will be done through the OCI marketplace. Let me change what I'm sharing so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. So it's not there yet, so you will not see. This is a private location, but this is what would happen if you go to the marketplace and when it's available, find the OSB image there, and then you can just click on GitHub. Okay, you sign in, that it's asking in this case. Okay, you select the cloud account name, where you're going to, you log in with the user. That can do that. This is very basic. I mean, for any one of you tried already and doing this for any other application, it's very similar, right? It's a marketplace deployment. You select the image one. Currently, we only have this one, which is the latest OSB version. The compartment you want to use, and you click on launch instance. You specify the instance name you want to use, the compartment again, you want it to go the domain. This is not different than any other compute instance provisioning, right? You select the image that you want to use. You specify the networking. You can use an existing network. The subnet you want to use, again, nothing new. You add the SSH keys, so you'd be able to add it. You specify which boot volume you want to use and encryption, and then you click on create. And this will just initiate the provisioning of OSB, of the OSB admin server in OCI. It's already configured with its own firewall, the open ports, and everything you need to run in OCI. No need to do anything else. The first time you log into it, you specify the admin password that you want to set and the key store password you want to set, and that's it, and you're ready to go. And I'm not going to do it because it takes a few minutes. So what I'm doing, I'm sharing the instance that I already provisioned, and I want to show you how easy it is to deploy the clients using the Ansible. So inside the instance that is deployed through the marketplace, there is a folder called OSB playbooks, and in the OSB playbooks there is a folder. There are actually the Ansible playbooks. All you need to do if you want to deploy clients to Ansible is edit the host file, which is also, which is also part of the installation. Yes, it's here. Oh, come on. Okay. You add some parameters, like you specify the SSH private key that you want to use to log into the clients. You specify the admin host name, which is the one you entered when you deployed the image. And then you enter here a list of clients. These are the client's host name where the client component is going to be deployed. And you can add a media server list where the media servers, this will be configured as media servers. And that is basically it. Once you've done that, you just run the playbook. So let's run it. Let me do this. Let me do a search here. Okay. Oh, let me show you one more thing, just to show you this. Okay. If you look at the good thing of OSB is that everything can be done through command line. So this allows you to create any automation you want. If you want to use a different tool, you can use a different tool. If you want to use Ansible, you can take this as they are, or you can modify them and change these playbooks to and customize them for whatever your need is. And everything else, okay, can be also scripted in any other way. OB tool is the tool to run it through command line. If you want to use the web tool and the web console, you can use the web console for OSB. You can use Enterprise Manager if you want to use Enterprise Manager. But again, in the cloud, it's probably easier to just go with the command line. Okay. Okay, good. I entered the wrong command. Okay. As you can see, there's nothing here. This is on the only server, which is the admin server and media server that is currently configured, which is this server that's been deployed through the marketplace. Okay. So let's go and find. Okay. Okay. Let's run the command to run the playbook, which is just Ansible playbook. You specify the playbook name, which is the installed one, the other was uninstall. You specify which parts of the host file you want to run, and I want to use it for both installing the clients and the media servers. And you specify the host file name, which is the one that I just showed you. It asks for the OSB admin user, and now it wants the password. And that's it. It just runs. It collects the information. This is only a warning on the version. It deploys, so you will see it in a moment. It takes probably a minute or two. It connects to the clients, deploys the installation file, which is what it just did. It's extracting the installation files, the installation binaries from the zip files is deployed, and it's also take a minute. And then it will install it and configure it as OSB client. Okay, this is what it is doing now. It's now adding, okay, it's done. It's adding the client list to OSB. So now if I run the same list host command and OB tool, you see that we have obviously the media server, which is still an admin server, which is still there. And now we have the 4 clients that were specified in the host there, and the media server that it is here. So it's very easy. The only thing to do at this point is really configure a destination device using an object storage bucket, and configure a data set where to define which file systems you want to backup, and you're ready to run backups and restore all of your file system data in OCI. That's all I had. I probably want to show you one more thing on the slide. So let me go back there. It is the OSB product page. You can go there You will find all the information in here as soon as the marketplace image is available. Obviously, you can go directly to the OCI marketplace and search for it, but otherwise it will be published here. We will publish the documentation with more details on how to use it on here, and also we will publish all the new information when the new features and the new version will be made available. Anything else, obviously, you can always contact us, and yeah, I'm happy to join other meetings or discussion, and we can go into more details. Okay. Thank you for now. I think and give it back to you, Kelly, for closing this. And yeah, and thanks everyone.
All right, thank you so much, Marco. Are there any last questions for the Q&A? We'll start with that.
Kelly, there were a number of questions about the roadmap items, including the on-prem support for the recovery service, if you can elaborate on it.
Right, yes. So on all the initial release of recovery service supports OCI database service, and specifically autonomous dedicated, Exadata database service, and base database service. All other support is on the roadmap and will be delivered in the future. So if it doesn't fall in those three categories, it'll be on the roadmap and will be delivered later. And I saw some questions about, different pieces of functionality, restore capabilities, long-term retention backups, all those components. Pay attention to the features that are available for each database service. They vary. So depending on the workflow that you want to accomplish, check the workflow and functionality that's available for the database service, because that's where the functionality will actually be exposed. So if you're looking for something specific around, I want to restore to a different location, just look at the documentation for your OCI database service. That's where that functionality will appear. The recovery service is just a destination for backups. The actual workflows for recovery and for how the workflow works for the customer in the database actually appears in the individual database service functionality. So keep an eye there. If it's listed there, it obviously is supported. And if not, we can cover that as a roadmap item with those database services. And then we've got a few more questions coming in. How is the backup catalog handled with the ZDLRA backups? Are they handled the control file 0 currently? Okay, so just as the recovery appliance on premises has a catalog built into that solution, the recovery service also has a recovery catalog built into the recovery service. So we're not relying on the control file. It's all built upon the recovery catalog that's built into the service. And again, all that's automated. The customer doesn't have to worry about managing the catalog or doing anything with the catalog. The policy is going to control all the backup retention and cleaning up the catalog and purging backups. Everything that needs to be done is all handled automatically. There's a question about pricing. Pricing will be publicly available when we get closer to GA, so that'll be soon. But you'll see details that will be posted both on the site for the autonomous recovery service and in the sales tools available internally for the Oracle sales organization. Can we consider, so all functionality available on the recovery appliance will be the same in OCI. So someone's asking, okay, the recovery appliance is shipped on premises today. Is all the functionality of that available in the recovery service? From a backup and recovery perspective, I think generally we can say yes. There are some, it depends on when you say functionality. there are some differences between the recovery service and the recovery appliance, because the recovery appliance is on premises. So functionality like how much space is available, that's a recovery appliance problem. The recovery service, you don't have to worry about any kind of space management. So all the functionality around space management's never exposed, because users are never exposed to any requirements around trying to manage space of their backups. We are doing that through automation, making sure that there's plenty of space for you to send backups to the recovery service, and it's load balanced, and there's not, contention at all. So, but generally the same incremental forever validation, all that stuff that's prevalent in the recovery appliances in the recovery service. So, one full backup, incremental forever, zero data loss. That's all built in, and you can see that in the configuration. Okay. Any other questions?
No, we're right on time.
That is it. You're right, Marco. We're right at the top of the hour. Thanks so much for joining us. We will have another office hours in December, I think. I don't know. We'll have to look at the December calendar to see if it lines up with the holidays or not. If not, we'll see you in the new year. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day. And if you have any additional questions, please post them to the Ask Tom site. Also, if you have any topics that you want us to cover, let us know. Send us a message on Ask Tom. Let us know what you want to hear about. We can add that into our schedule of items to cover during our office hours. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.